What is media censorship? Oxford defines media censorship as any regime or context in which the content of what is publicly expressed, exhibited, published, broadcast, or otherwise distributed is regulated, or in which the circulation of information is controlled. The official grounds for such control at a national level are variously political, moral, social, or religious. Arguably, the most famous example of this was Stalin's regime over the Soviet Union. Stalin was of the belief that truth invites debate, something he could not allow if he wanted full control over his citizens. To dissuade truth, he spread propaganda and disinformation. The rubric he followed was simple. If it preserves the interests of the revolutions, it's true. Otherwise, it never happened. In simple terms, he wanted to rewrite history. Stalin's goal was not an isolated one. Hitler ordered the destruction of World War I memorials, erasing Germany's defeat. And Mao Zedong denied that any Chinese citizens starved because of his Great Leap Forward, while evidence shows the famine killed up to 45 million. As George Orwell famously wrote, "He who controls the past controls the future." When he rose to power in 1929, Stalin inherited a fully controlled media from Lenin, his predecessor. This made reaching his agenda much easier, including full censorship. But what exactly couldn't you talk about? Individual income, price increases, anything involving food shortages or generalized hunger, statistics on crime, unemployment, or homelessness, reports of natural or man-made disasters, news of prison conditions, ads for foreign goods, the names of government officials and their spouses, the availability of medicine, anything about the architecture of the Kremlin, and repairs to the Bolshoi Theater were all off limits. And these are just a few of the regulations Stalin insisted on. To keep his citizens' ideals in line with his own, Stalin also ordered libraries to ban or burn certain books, including Sherlock Holmes, who was too individualistic, and Robinson Crusoe, a capitalist hero who forges his own path and somehow survives. In the late 1920s, Stalin started the major process of reforming Soviet agriculture by trying to put people into collective farms. The peasants would be the producers for the cities, the army, and export. This system led to a famine in the Ukraine in 1931. Millions of people were starving to death because of Stalin's decision, and many got so desperate they resorted to cannibalism. Instead of admitting his mistake, Stalin decided to sacrifice the lives of the Ukrainians to protect what he thought was a much more important goal, preserving the existing social system. He created his own reality, assuring people everything was under control and would be taken care of shortly. To ensure no foreigners find out what's happening, he closes Ukraine off from the world's view. This leads to another strategy of censorship: gain support from outsiders. Hitler had early supporters in the Duke and Duchess of Windsor and Charles Lindbergh. Fidel Castro had Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and surprisingly, Kim Jong-un has Dennis Rodman. Stalin, however, turns to U.S. reporter Walter Duranty, the New York Times man in Moscow since 1922. Known for his ambitions and shaky ethics, he was the perfect target for Stalin, who offered him exclusive interviews at the Kremlin. Duranty writes glowing reviews of the Soviet leader and is invited to visit the Ukraine. At first, he's selectively shown places unaffected by the famine, but as he travels further into the country, he sees the truth of the disaster. Instead of reporting this truth, Duranty continued filing articles about how the famine is being overblown, and would go on to win a Pulitzer Prize for his lies. Finally, to ensure utter control over his citizens' lives, Stalin decides he needs to target religion. Religion answers questions that can't be answered, and Stalin wants to be the only source of truth. So, the Soviet Union provided their own dogma, called Marxism-Leninism. They celebrated their own holidays and replaced Jesus and the saints with Soviet martyrs, like Pavlik Morozov. Pavlik was a 13-year-old boy living in a small village. During the Great Famine, his loyalty to the state is tested when he finds out his father has been hoarding and selling grain for profit. He makes the patriotic choice of turning his father in to the local secret police. His family is displeased by this, and they murder Pavlik in a forest. The Soviet newspapers spread the news of his crime, and his family is executed. Pavlik becomes a folk hero, and Stalin makes sure he lives on through plays, books, and a full-length opera. However, Pavlik never existed. His entire story was fabricated by the government for propaganda purposes. While Stalin's regime is certainly a famous example of media censorship, his is far from the only one. Throughout history, dictators have controlled their citizens by regulating what they are exposed to, whether it be through books, movies, or television. Total censorship is not even an idea of the past, and lives on in socialist countries such as China and North Korea. And while this is a very drastic example, media censorship is intertwined in daily life all around the world. To some extent, every country and every social media platform uses censorship as a tool to control and regulate their citizens and users.